Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Sir Lou. This is the Pink and Purple Group Weekly Learning Plan. The creative title of our weekly home learning plan is Every X Has Its Y Algebra. And the given learning area for us is Math 8 and with its first quarter and second quarter with grading period. And the number of days would be 5 days. The content standards would be the learner demonstrates understanding of key concepts of factors of polynomials, rational algebraic expressions, linear equations and inequalities in two variables, systems of linear equations and inequalities in two variables and linear functions. The performance standards would be the learner is able to formulate real-life problems involving factors of polynomials, rational algebraic expressions, linear equations and inequalities in two variables, systems of linear equations and inequalities in two variables and linear functions, and solve these problems accurately using a variety of strategies. For the part 1, our agreed time would be 9 to 10:30 a.m. And for the Monday schedule, the learning competency is illustrates linear equations in two variables, writes the linear equations ax plus by is equals to c in the form of y is equals to mx plus b and vice versa. Illustrates a system of linear equations in two variables. The learning task would be discussion, which would let the learners watch, read, and study linear equations in two variables and its systems by learning the illustrative examples. Another learning task would be independent practice. The learners will be given an activity to write the linear equation and describe its graph. For the learning task in discussion, the students will be given supplementary materials by giving them a YouTube link to watch for the given learning competency and a reading material for them to study at home. For the ICT integration, the hardware students would need to have laptop, cell phone, tab, or computer, or any physical technological tools that can be used to learn the given task. And for software, Microsoft Office can be used to write the given task.
Then for Tuesday, the agreed time is 9 to 10:30 a.m. Our learning competency will find the equation of a line given 2 points, the slope and a point, the slope and its intercepts. Graphs a system of linear equation in two variables. Categorizes when a given system of linear equation in two variables has graphs that are parallel, intersecting, and coinciding. For learning tasks, we have contextualization, then problem-based learning, where students will be grouped depending on the class population. Then student will present on how to find, graph, and categorizes linear equation into variables and its systems using the real-world problems, and they will be present it on the class. Then for learning tasks, we have assessment. After the presentation, students will evaluate the reporters depending on the rubrics given. Then for ICT integration, for hardware, we have laptop or computer will be the most appropriate tool to use for the given activity. For software, we have application like Microsoft PowerPoint, Canva, or any other presentation application can be used. Then we have a learning competency. Illustrate linear inequalities in two variables. Differentiates linear inequalities in two variables from linear equation in two variables. Then graph linear inequalities in two variables. Then for learning tasks, we have discussion. Then read and study the example in the book. Then we have supplementary materials and watch the following video discussion for illustrating linear inequalities into variables and differentiating it to the linear equation into variables. Then graphing linear inequalities into variables. Then for learning tasks, independent practice, practice graphing at home, answer the practice exercise in page 10. Then another learning task, assessment. This is a think pair share activity. Consider the following mathematical statement and tell whether it is a linear inequality or linear equation in two variables. Then for ICT integration, for hardware, we have laptop, projector, and speaker will be the most appropriate tool to use for the discussion. Then for software, application like Microsoft PowerPoint, Canva, or any other presentation application can be used for the activity.
So for the Thursday schedule, the learning competencies are as follows. The students will solve a system of linear inequalities in two variables. Solves problems involving systems of linear inequalities in two variables. For their learning task, it will be an independent practice, which will be a 1 hour long quiz. And in ICT integration for hardware, laptop, cell phone, and tab or computer, or any physical technological tools that can be used to take the quiz. For software, applications like Quizzes, ZipGrade, and Google Forms will be used. For Friday schedule, the learning competencies are as follows. The students will solve problems involving linear equations in two variables, solves a system of linear equations in two variables by graphing, substitution, and elimination. The students will also solve problem involving systems of linear equations in two variables. For their learning task will be an independent practice, which is a 1 hour long quiz. For the ICT integration, for hardware, laptop, cell phone, tab, or computer, any physical technological tools that can be used to take the quiz. For software, applications like Quizzes, ZipGrade, and Google Forms.
So in part two, it is more on what are the unsay may tabo sa classroom. So in Monday, the time allotment is 9 to 10:30 a.m. The learning competency illustrates the linear equation in two variables, writes the linear equation ax plus by is equal to c in the form of y is equal to mx plus b and vice versa. Illustrates a system of linear equation in two variables. And specific daily learning outcomes is through the administered activity and discussion of linear equations in two variables, the student will be able to determine their readiness and advanced topic on linear equation in two variables, illustrate and writes linear equation in two variables and its systems. Then the daily procedures start the class with short prayer, administer a 15-minute activity for the students, show a video about learning equation, which is in nasa nasa part 1, then do an interactive lesson with student, then discuss the learning competency for the day, give the student a handout on the topic, group the student depending on the class population, and lastly, give them an activity that they will report and present next meeting. On Tuesday, the time allotment is the same, 9 to 30 a.m. The learning competency is finds the equation of a given line. Letter A, 2 points. Letter B, slope and a point. Letter C, slope and intercepts. And graphs a linear equation in two variables. Categorize when a given system of linear equation in two variables as graphs that are parallel, intersecting, and coinciding. A specific daily learning outcome through the administered group activity and analysis on linear equation in two variables, the students will be able to understand the linear equations in two variables and its system, find the equation of a line given 2 points, the slope and a point and the slope of its intercepts, graphs systems of linear equation in two variables. Then the daily procedures. First good is start the class with a short prayer. Then sa Monday is nato siya nakabutang dito nga Like group reporting, so give the reporters 2 minutes to prepare. Then let the reporters discuss their given activity. After the presentation, ask the students regarding to the report. Then lastly, give the students an evaluation of the report. That's all.
For Wednesday, the learning competency are as follows. The students will illustrate linear inequalities in two variables. The students will differentiate linear inequalities in two variables from linear equations in two variables. And lastly, graphs linear inequalities in two variables. The specific daily learning outcomes through the administered activity on linear inequalities and linear equation in two variables, the students will be able to define linear inequalities in two variables, distinguish the differences between linear inequalities and linear equation in two variables, and illustrate graphs involving linear inequalities in two variables. The daily procedures. First, we start our class with a short prayer, and then we recall the past discussions, and after that, we present the learning competency to the class and specifically the specific learning outcome. And then we play a video discussion about linear inequalities and linear equation in two variables, and then we discuss points that the students did not understand well, and administer a think pair share activity and let the students report their answers to the class, and lastly give a practice exercise that will be done at home. For the Thursday schedule, the learning competency are as follows. The students will solve a system of linear inequalities in two variables and solve problems involving system of linear inequalities in two variables. The specific daily learning outcomes through the administered long quiz, the students will be able to analyze a real-life problem involving system of linear inequalities in two variables and its system, solves a real-life problems on linear inequalities in two variables and its system. The daily procedures, we always start our class with a short prayer. And after that, we check the attendance in order to make sure that everyone is present before taking the quiz. And after that, we will make sure that the students will open their cameras to make sure that no cheating may happen. And then we give students the link of the quiz and give the students 1 hour to take the said quiz. And lastly, students may leave the Google Classroom once they are done taking the quiz.
So for the Friday, the learning competencies are to solve problems involving linear equations into variables, to so a system of linear equations into variables, the graphing, the substitution, and the elimination. And the next one is to solve problems involving systems of linear equations into variables. For the specific daily learning outcomes, through the administered long quiz, the students will be able to analyze a real-life problem involving linear equations into variables and its system, and also the graphing, substitution, and elimination. Next is to solve a real-life problems on a linear equations into variables and its system, and also the graphing, substitution, and elimination. For the daily procedures, of course, the class will start with a short prayer. Then after that, the attendance will be checked in order to make sure that everyone is present before taking the quiz. The next is to make the students open their camera to make sure that there is no cheating may happen. Next is to give the students the link of the quiz, and after that, give the students 1 hour to take the said quiz. And after, the students will leave the Google Classroom once they are done taking the quiz. So again, thank you for listening, and I hope. And if you have questions, do not hesitate to message and email the Pink and Purple group. group. Thank you, and once again, God bless us all.